My name is Kayla. At my own birthday, they gave me a folding chair by the trash cans. At my wedding, they asked if my sister could walk down the aisle before me. They said I was always too quiet, too easygoing. But the truth? They never meant to include me. I was just the placeholder until she showed up. But this time, I rewrote the ending, and no one saw it coming. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from, and have you ever been the forgotten one in your own family? Drop a comment. I read everyone. They told me the party started at 3, so I arrived at 2:30 sharp, like I always do. Not because I wanted to be early, but because I knew no one would have thought to set things up unless I did. That's how these family events go. Unspoken jobs fall to the one who doesn't ask for anything in return. It was a shared birthday, mine and Valora's. We were born 2 years and 1 week apart, close enough to be grouped, not close enough to be equals. I walked through the sliding glass door of my parents' backyard, holding a bag of soda bottles and napkins I'd bought myself. The autumn sun was warm but fading, casting long shadows over the folding tables lined up beneath the string lights. And there it was. The cake sat in the center of the long buffet table, adorned with pastel yellow frosting and lemon slices curled into elegant spirals. Lemon, Valora's favorite since we were kids. Mine, chocolate, always chocolate, but nobody ever asked. I stared at the cake like it was a dare. "It's just a cake," I muttered, setting the sodas down beside the cooler. But it never was. Not when it's the same story every single year. Same flavor, same song, same spotlight for her. It was never about the frosting, it was about the forgetting. Again and again. The yard began to fill as guests trickled in. Valora's friends from her yoga group, 2 cousins from Arizona, a couple of people I didn't recognize. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, their strings knotted around the table legs. I scanned the seating arrangement. The main table was already nearly full. Elegant name tags in gold script marked every seat but one. My name wasn't there. I turned toward the far end of the yard. By the shed, next to the garbage bin, was a single folding chair. No name card, no plate, just a chair. I walked up to my mother, who was adjusting the drink dispensers. "Hey, Mom, I think there's been a mistake. I don't see my seat." Without looking up, she waved her hand. "Oh, sweetie, Valora invited her whole yoga crew and some out-of-state guests. You don't mind sitting back there, right? It's just a seat, no big deal." Before I could say anything, Valora appeared behind her and added with a laugh, "You always said you liked peace and quiet." Someone nearby chuckled. Then another. Suddenly it was funny, except it wasn't. I smiled, tight, practiced, but inside, something sharp twisted. I walked to the folding chair and sat down. The metal creaked beneath me. From this angle, the table was half hidden behind a row of rose bushes. I couldn't even see the cake anymore. But that was fine. I was never really meant to be part of the table anyway. From my corner, I watched Valora work the crowd, her arms looping around people, her laugh sharp and full. Someone handed her a gift wrapped in gold foil. She didn't look at me once. And as I sat there, something else came rushing back. Not a moment, but a pattern. I remembered the birthday when she blew out my candles before I could make a wish. My 16th, canceled because she had a last-minute track meet. Junior year, when I won that essay contest and no one showed up to the awards night because Valora had a sore throat. Even my graduation photo was half hidden behind hers on the family wall. I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the extra, the spare. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes again, Aunt Marcy was beside me. She crouched down so she was eye level, her silver hair pinned back in a soft twist. "You all right, Kayla?" I nodded, forcing a smile. She hesitated, then said quietly, "You've always been too kind, you know." Too kind. Maybe I had been. Or maybe I had just learned that silence was easier than arguing with people who only hear what they want. That if I stayed quiet, I wouldn't be accused of starting something. But kindness isn't always chosen. Sometimes it's trained, beaten into you by years of being overlooked, misnamed, misseated. When they brought the cake out, I was gone. No one stopped me. No one noticed. Not even Valora, standing in front of that lemon monstrosity, laughing as they sang for both of us. I walked to my car in silence, keys in hand, past the guests I'd helped set up for. And I didn't cry. Not in the car, not on the drive home. But that night, when I checked the group chat for Valora's engagement party, I wasn't in it anymore. Not even as a courtesy. By morning, the dull ache in my chest had settled into something colder. A kind of hollowness I couldn't shake. I reached for my phone, still half asleep, and instinctively opened the messaging app. 47 new messages under a group chat I hadn't seen in weeks. Manson family planning chat. Except, I wasn't in it. Those messages weren't for me, just preview notifications, leftovers from a chat I'd once been part of. My thumb hovered over the screen. I refreshed. Nothing. I wasn't removed accidentally. I'd been erased, quietly, like chalk off a board. Out of reflex, I opened Facebook. Valora had posted a photo of a Pinterest-worthy table arrangement captioned, "Surprising our future bride with the engagement party of her dreams, so lucky to have a family that listens and makes magic happen." I zoomed in on the names tagged. Mom, Aunt Lisa, her best friend Clarissa, not me. There was no mention of my name, not even a "thank you for the ideas" or a pity tag in the comments. The whole post might as well have been a glossy ad for a family I was biologically part of, but emotionally banished from. 3 days later, Mom called. "We'd love to see you at Valora's engagement party, sweetheart," she said, cheerful and clipped. "No pressure to bring anything. Just show up, support your sister, be part of the moment." Just show up, like a +1 to my own bloodline. Desmond offered to skip it with me, but I declined. I needed to see it for myself. Needed to know if this disconnect was as wide as it felt, or if I was just spiraling. The event was held at an upscale venue on the west side of Houston. White drapes lined the walls, candles floated in tall glass cylinders, and a string quartet played near the entrance. Everything was beautiful, perfect, like Valora always wanted. I stuck to the corner with Desmond, quietly observing. My mother gave me a quick nod when she saw me, but didn't cross the room. Valora made the rounds with a glass of champagne, air-kissing and smiling like she was already royalty. Then someone tapped the microphone near the center of the hall. A middle-aged man in a lavender suit said, "Before we toast, we'd like to share a heartfelt surprise, a speech from Valora's little sister, Kayla." Heads turned. Desmond looked at me, confused. I hadn't prepared anything. I hadn't even known I was part of the program. Before I could react, Valora stepped forward, holding a folded piece of paper. "She was too shy to read this herself," she said with a smile, "but I wanted to share what she wrote to me because it touched me so deeply." Valora unfolded the paper and began reading. "You've always been the light in our family. Watching you chase your dreams has been my greatest inspiration." I stood frozen. Those weren't my words. "You're everything I wish I could be. I'm so proud to call you my sister." Applause erupted. A few guests dabbed at their eyes. Valora wiped an imaginary tear and folded the paper back with such sincerity that for a moment I almost believed she was moved. Desmond leaned close and whispered, "Wait, I thought you sent that to her." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, my voice dry. "I didn't write anything." After the claps faded and people returned to their drinks and chatter, I tried to walk toward Valora, maybe to ask why, maybe to stop myself from exploding. But before I got halfway, my mother intercepted me. "Kayla," she said in that syrupy tone she saved for damage control. "Let it go. Don't make a scene. That's not who we are." That line again, not who we are. Who was we exactly? Because it felt a lot like we meant everyone else, and I was just tolerated around the edges. Desmond reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I needed air. I slipped out the side door, heels clicking against the patio tiles. The sky had darkened, but the noise from inside still spilled out like laughter from a party I'd never been invited to. Later that night, once we were back home, I sat at my desk and opened the old planning doc Valora had once shared with me months ago. It had been titled Engagement Ideas Sisters Only. At the time, it made me smile. Now, access denied. My permissions had been revoked. I checked my inbox. Nothing. No emails, no questions, no "are you okay?" texts, not even a fake apology. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't some careless mistake. It was a rewrite. And they were the editors. They didn't just want to sideline me. They wanted to narrate who I was, without me, as if I had no voice at all. That night, after brushing my teeth and pretending sleep would come easy, I found myself digging through the hallway closet for something I hadn't looked at in years, the old family photo albums. I sat cross-legged on the floor, thumbing through pages thick with glossy memories, page protectors yellowing with age. And that's when I saw it. A photo from Valora's 5th birthday party. She was in the center, crown on her head, pink frosting smeared on her cheek. I was off to the side, smiling faintly, except now, a faint gouge ran across my face, like someone had scraped the photo with a fingernail. Not torn, not removed, just scratched. Deliberate enough to feel intentional, subtle enough to be deniable. I sat there on the living room floor long after midnight, surrounded by torn cardboard boxes and dust-coated photo albums. The heater hummed faintly in the background, but it couldn't warm the spot I was sitting in. That chill wasn't physical. I flipped another page. There, tucked into the plastic sleeve, was a snapshot from my 8th birthday. Valora was front and center, clapping with her mouth open mid-laugh, in a bright yellow dress with a matching ribbon in her hair. I stood next to her, grinning shyly, but my face had a faint, intentional X drawn over it. Ballpoint pen, just deep enough to pierce the glossy finish, not accidental, not playful. I blinked hard. Maybe it was a stupid prank from a cousin. Maybe it was Valora. Maybe it was my own mom trying to erase something she didn't want to remember. But the truth? I didn't believe in maybe anymore. I pulled out another album. This one covered our school years, kindergarten through high school. I flipped faster now, fingers a little clumsy. Every page was a shrine to Valora. Her recital photos, her cheerleading shots, her most likely to lead award. Each page captioned in my mother's handwriting with stickers and curled, decorative tape. When I finally found a photo of myself, standing beside my science fair display with a handmade volcano, I noticed there was no caption, no sticker, just a blurry image on the corner of a crowded page. I remembered that science fair. I won 3rd place citywide. But Mom missed it because Valora had a dentist appointment. Braces off, smile perfect, priorities clear. That was the pattern. One memory after another poured back in, not like a flood, but like a slow leak I'd been ignoring. At 12, I'd won a regional poetry contest. Mom had said, "Well, your sister just got her braces off. Let's take a family photo to celebrate that." I didn't argue. I had learned by then not to. Still, a part of me had always hoped I was wrong, that maybe I'd been too sensitive, that I'd misread the signs. But tonight, with the photo in my lap and the pen-scratched X over my childhood face staring back at me, I couldn't pretend anymore. I picked up my phone and called Dad. It rang 4 times before he answered, his voice groggy but warm. "Kayla, you okay?" "Yeah, just had a memory come up." He waited. "Do you remember when I got that scholarship in high school for creative writing?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Wasn't that Valora's? She did something with journalism, right? Worked real hard." The silence between us was too heavy to break with small talk. "I stayed up every night for weeks working on that application," I said quietly. "She didn't even submit hers." He mumbled something about mixing things up, about how long ago it was, but I already knew. It wasn't about memory. It was about preference. They hadn't forgotten me. They just rewrote the narrative so I was never the lead. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of tea I didn't touch. The light over the sink buzzed faintly. I pulled out a notebook, something I hadn't done in years, and started to write. Not for anyone else, just for me. They didn't forget me. They replaced me. That was the line that stuck. I'd been the one taking photos, clapping from the sidelines, holding bags, fixing skirts, picking up dry cleaning. I was the one Valora handed her heels to during her senior prom so she could dance barefoot. I was the one who made playlists for our road trips, packed backup chargers, brought extra hairpins just in case. In every story, I was useful, but never seen. That realization burned, not like fire, like acid. I thought back to a memory I hadn't touched in years. age 10. I'd baked cupcakes by myself, messy, half-burned things with uneven frosting, for Dad's birthday. I had waited at the door with a plate in my hands. Valora had walked in with a store-bought cake, red velvet with cream cheese swirls, and his name piped in cursive. Mom beamed. Dad laughed. They posed for photos. No one touched my cupcakes. Later that night, I had thrown them away in the outside trash. No one even noticed they were gone. It wasn't one big betrayal that broke me. It was all these small erasures stacked one on top of the other, little disappearances. That night, I looked around my apartment, my space, my silence, my untouched mug, and I felt something click. This wasn't about one party. It was about years of being the placeholder in someone else's celebration, years of shrinking so Valora could shine, years of hoping they'd see me if I just stayed quiet and useful long enough. But I wasn't going to be replaced in my wedding. Not again. Not this time. I woke up that morning with a strange kind of clarity, the kind that settles in only after you've finally admitted to yourself that the fairy tale is over, and it never included you anyway. My coffee had gone cold by the time Desmond arrived to pick me up. He didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept. He just handed me a fresh cup and drove quietly, his hand resting over mine during most of the ride. Mom had called the night before, her tone overly sweet. "Come by tomorrow afternoon," she said. "We want to go over some wedding things." I should have known the word "we" was a warning. When we pulled into the driveway, I paused before opening the car door. The house looked the same wreath, same flower pots, but I felt different walking toward it, like someone stepping into a courtroom instead of a home. Inside, Mom greeted Desmond with one of her rehearsed smiles, all bright teeth and tension behind the eyes. "You look thinner. Are you eating?" she asked, patting his arm. Then she turned to me with a nod, like a store clerk acknowledging a return customer. Dad sat in his recliner, glasses halfway down his nose, leafing through some printed papers. "Glad you made it," he said without looking up. We sat in the living room. Mom brought out iced tea for Desmond and water for me. No lemon, finally, but I didn't drink it. "We've been thinking," Dad said, setting the papers down. "We'd like to contribute to your wedding fund, but there's a condition." I already knew I wouldn't like the sentence that followed. "Valora should walk down the aisle first, just a symbolic thing. She's the older sister. It's tradition." I blinked. Tradition? Like we're a royal family? Or like when you celebrated our birthdays together and forgot mine entirely? Desmond shifted in his seat. Mom glanced down, smoothing an invisible wrinkle in her blouse. "You know how sensitive Valora is," she added quickly. "It would mean a lot to her. She's been through a lot with the breakup and—" "You mean the breakup she caused?" I interrupted. "With someone else's husband?" Silence. "That's not fair," Dad said flatly. "You're better than this." That line again. Desmond squeezed my hand. I didn't look at him. I just stared at my parents and felt something in me close, permanently. They handed me a packet, financial documents I'd submitted months ago, requesting some support for the wedding. I opened it slowly. My signature had been crossed out in red ink, notes written beside it also in red. "Valora needs this more. She's fragile. Kayla might not follow through. Wait." I didn't say anything for a moment. I read and reread the lines like they were in a foreign language. Then I looked up. "Why did you cross me out of something that was mine?" Dad adjusted his glasses. "It's just temporary. You're not ready." "Not ready?" My voice didn't rise. It dropped. "You mean not compliant?" Mom tried to soften the moment. "You've always been the responsible one, Kayla. You don't need as much help." "That's your excuse?" I asked. "That I've been too capable? So you gave everything to the one who self-destructs and calls it drama?" They didn't answer. They didn't need to. Later that evening, I found myself in my childhood bedroom, or what used to be mine. It smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. My books were gone. The walls were bare. Valora's cheer uniform still hung on the closet door like a relic. I touched the fabric. It felt stiff and unfamiliar. "I was here," I whispered. "I existed. You just chose not to see me." Desmond stood in the doorway, quiet. "How much more are you willing to give?" he asked gently. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the imprint where a photo of me used to be. Not one more signature, I said. Not one more seat behind her. That was the night we started making real plans, not for the wedding they thought they controlled, but for the one I would reclaim. I would wear the dress I chose. I would say the vows I wrote, and I would invite the people who actually saw me, not just used me as a backdrop. So when they asked for my final guest list, I sent them a version missing one key name: hers. Desmond's words echoed in my ears as I stirred cream into my coffee the next morning. Let's make them pay for emotional damages. I wasn't sure if he'd meant it literally or figuratively, but either way, I didn't flinch. I just sipped my coffee and started making a different kind of list. By the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was her again. Mom. Same sing-song tone, like the previous conversations hadn't happened. Hi, sweetheart. We're still open to helping with the venue, if you'll just reconsider one small thing. I pressed the speaker button and raised my eyebrows at Desmond across the room. He started recording, his thumb gliding over the voice memo app like this was muscle memory. Mom's voice continued, syrupy but calculated. Valora she needs this closure. Walking the aisle before you would mean so much to her. Think of it as symbolic, healing even. I didn't respond right away. Let the silence sit. Then I said, "And what do I get, Mom?" There was a pause on her end, not long, but just enough to signal discomfort. "You get your wedding," she replied, like that was some kind of prize I should be grateful for. After we hung up, Desmond chuckled under his breath and muttered, "That's not help, that's a leash." I agreed. That night, I got an email with a shipping notification. The next day, a large, carefully wrapped package arrived at our apartment. Inside was a gown, off-white, dated lace, high neckline, long sleeves, and bulky satin around the hips. It looked like something borrowed from a church basement in 1983. There was a note attached, in Mom's slanted cursive. Valora helped pick it. More modest, classic. I texted her back. "Thank you, I'll try it." But I didn't, not even close. I stuffed the dress back into the box and shoved it under the guest bed. It felt like a costume someone expected me to wear in their version of my life. A few days later, while I was in the kitchen, Desmond walked in holding his phone to his ear on speaker. It was Valora's voice. Light, chatty, just loud enough. "If she wears anything other than the one we gave her," she said with a giggle, "I'll make sure it disappears before the wedding. No one upstages me on camera." My hand tightened around the handle of my coffee mug, but I said nothing. Desmond played along, his tone flat. "She's being stubborn, but I'll handle it." Valora laughed like it was all a game. "You better," she said. "Otherwise, you might find the seamstress got confused." We hung up. Later that night, we drove to a friend's boutique across town, where my real dress, one I had picked with no one's permission, was hidden. Soft blush with delicate embroidery, A-line, sleeveless, elegant, and powerful. It felt like armor. "This one's not going anywhere," I told Desmond as we locked it up in a garment bag and left it in the back of the tailor's private studio. "She has no idea how far ahead you are," he said, grinning. The next morning, I met Aunt Marcy at a small coffee shop tucked away near the bayou. She ordered chamomile tea. I went with black coffee, no sugar. She looked me in the eye and said softly, "You know, I saw them do this to your father's sister too. Different version, same control." I raised an eyebrow. She left town at 19, took only her high school diploma and one suitcase, never looked back. "What happened to her?" I asked. "She owns a chain of antique stores in Vermont now, sends Christmas cards every year. No one opens them." I smiled, because I understood exactly what that meant. Before we left, Marcy reached into her purse and pressed a folded note into my hand. "Don't let them steal your voice, Kayla. Not this time." That night, I pulled out my journal again. But instead of writing guest names or to-do lists, I wrote a title across the page in thick black ink. Things they took without asking. Things I'm taking back. And underneath, I started listing. Not objects, but moments. My 10th birthday cake. The scholarship speech they credited to Valora, the dress that was never for me, the seat I never got at the table. By the time I was done, it looked less like a list and more like a declaration. Desmond came in from the balcony and glanced at my notebook. He didn't ask. He just sat beside me, kissed my temple, and said, "Let's make them regret underestimating you." I didn't answer, but I didn't disagree. I didn't sleep that night, not out of rage or sadness, but because I felt clear for the first time in months. While Desmond slept beside me, breathing slow and steady, I sat in the kitchen with my laptop open, writing names, notes, moves, countermoves. The list was no longer emotional. It was tactical. It was mine. By late morning, Desmond walked out in sweats, hair messy, a mug in one hand. He slid a small flash drive across the table. "I went to their place this morning," he said calmly, as if talking about the weather. "Just told them I wanted to help smooth things over before the wedding. They welcomed me in like I was the son they never had." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" He sipped. "You're going to want to sit down." I did. He plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Audio crackled to life. Mom's voice, unmistakably hers. "Kayla doesn't need the spotlight. She never has. She's always been quieter." Valora chimed in, "Just let me have this one thing. I mean, come on, she's already marrying first." Then Dad's voice, colder than I remembered. "If she pushes back, we pull the plug. It's our money. Our name." Desmond paused the recording. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't demand a reaction. It just settles in. "Now we know," he finally said. "And now we control the narrative." Later that week, Desmond called them again, playing the role to perfection. "Kayla's getting suspicious," he said on speaker. "You might want to show some goodwill, ease her nerves." It worked. My parents agreed to make a $10,000 donation to the wedding venue in their name, said it would be a gesture of support. Instead, Desmond rerouted the money through my LLC and submitted it under my grandmother's name, Margaret E. Langley. The only woman in the family who'd ever made me feel like I wasn't an afterthought. At the walkthrough, Mom froze when she saw the donor plaque by the main entrance, right beneath the gilded arch of the ceremony room, in honor of Margaret E. Langley, whose quiet strength built this family. "That's not what we agreed," Mom said through clenched teeth. I tilted my head. "It's what I needed." 2 days later, Desmond leaned into the deception even further. He dropped a seed to Valora during a casual call, pretending he was frustrated with me. "She's being impossible about the dress," he told her. "She's still going back and forth. Said she might swing by the venue late tonight to try it on without pressure." Valora didn't say much, just a clipped, "Thanks for the heads up." At 8:17 p.m., our motion sensor pinged. A camera Desmond had discreetly installed in the bridal suite sent a silent alert to his phone. He handed it to me. Valora was inside the room, alone. She scanned the space like a bloodhound, opened every drawer, tossed aside tissue-wrapped accessories, and muttered to herself, "She better not be playing games with me." Then, more bitterly, "If she won't wear the dress we gave her, she won't wear anything." I leaned forward, watching her search more frantically now, opening a closet, looking behind the garment bags. But the real dress wasn't there. It was locked away, miles from her reach. "She looks unhinged," I said flatly. "She looks exposed," Desmond replied. That night, we sat on the floor with takeout containers and replayed the clips. I watched her scroll through my things, touch what wasn't hers, scheme without guilt. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. It wasn't until I heard the last piece of audio, Mom, off camera, saying quietly to someone, "Valora deserves this wedding. Kayla will be fine. She always is." That did it. That tilt. That knife in the same old scar. I turned off the video and stared at the wall for a moment. Then I whispered, "Not this time." After I cleaned up the plates and shut off the lights, I sat at the dining table with our RSVP list open on my laptop. The cursor blinked over the search bar as I typed 2 addresses, ours and theirs. Then I opened the custom invitation file and printed 2 sets of guest lists. Only one of them had Valora's name, and it wasn't the version they'd be getting. The invitations had already gone out. One version went to the people I wanted by my side, real friends, chosen family, those who saw me. The other version, the decoy, had all the trimmings: velvet cardstock, fake RSVP links, and a venue I'd never set foot in. That morning, Desmond and I stopped by the real venue for one last walkthrough. The staff knew everything. No slip-ups allowed. Every name on the guest list was verified, every floral arrangement exact. And the best part? The donor plaque still glistened with my grandmother's name. Later that afternoon, Desmond handed our private security team the final file. "If anyone shows up without one of these passes," he said, holding up the custom Navy guest badge, "you kindly walk them right back to their car." The lead guard, Terry, a retired sheriff with hands like stone, nodded. "Understood. Bride's safety is priority." "And dignity," I added. "That's non-negotiable." Back at our apartment, I rechecked my dress, shoes, earrings. Everything was stored securely off-site. No last-minute switches, no risks. The backup team for the fake venue was in place. Marcy would be delayed with a bridesmaid group. They'd stage a lovely distraction while the real ceremony happened uninterrupted across town. We'd even scheduled 2 of my distant cousins, both low-key vloggers with big TikTok followings, to casually film the scene at the decoy location. Not with malice, but with clarity. Let the internet see what manipulation looks like when the cameras aren't supposed to be rolling. On the morning of the wedding, I took my time getting ready. Desmond waited in another room, sipping coffee and humming something off-key. The suite smelled like lavender and warm linen. Outside, the sun filtered softly through the garden trees. At precisely 11:20 a.m., we got the text. "She's arrived, wearing white." Valora had shown up at the decoy venue exactly as expected. Security told us she was early, insistent, and visibly irritated. "She said she was the bride," Terry texted Desmond. "I said, 'Ma'am, the bride's already here.'" Her face dropped. The real ceremony began at noon. As I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with Marcy, the air around us felt sacred, calm, present. No interruptions, no corrections, no passive-aggressive glances. Just people who knew why they were there, and who they were there for. Desmond stood at the altar, eyes steady. I saw in his face the thing I had longed for in every family member but never found: recognition without condition. The music swelled. My train glided across the grass. I didn't rush. For once, I didn't need to shrink. For once, I didn't have to rehearse the smile that made other people feel more comfortable. I said my vows with a voice that didn't quiver. Desmond's fingers never let go of mine. And when the applause came, it didn't feel borrowed or performed. It felt earned. "I guess this is what being seen really feels like," I whispered to him under the arch of eucalyptus and peonies. He smiled and kissed my knuckles. "Told you. You just needed the right room." We stepped off the platform, hand in hand. Glasses clinked, laughter rose, the first chords of the recessional played, and then phones began to buzz. It started with a few glances, then heads turning, brows raised. Guests began murmuring. Marcy pulled me aside, holding up her phone screen. A video had started going viral. Valora, outside the fake venue in her bridal gown, pounding on the locked doors. Her voice cracked with disbelief. "This was supposed to be mine." Then came the line that would echo through every replay. "I am the bride." A security guard's voice replied coolly, "There's already a bride inside." Desmond and I didn't flinch. We didn't need to, because justice didn't always shout. Sometimes it just walked down the aisle and let the cameras roll. The reception lights dimmed slightly, casting a soft golden glow over the tables as waitstaff refilled champagne glasses. I was mid-conversation with Desmond's Aunt Geneva when a ripple of movement caught my eye. Phones being lifted, heads turning, murmurs growing like a slow storm. Desmond was the first to reach for his phone. Then he raised an eyebrow at me, handed it over. The screen showed a video already racking up views. And there she was, Valora, dressed in white, clutching the skirt of her gown like it had betrayed her. She was pounding on the iron gates of the fake venue, mascara streaking, screaming, "I am the bride! I was promised! He said this was mine!" A security guard, stoic as a statue, stood calmly and replied, "There's already a bride inside." That line, simple, final, sliced through every narrative my family had ever tried to impose. Gasps echoed through our reception tent as more guests began watching, and soon the video was playing from someone's speaker in the back. My father could be seen in the clip yelling, "This is slander, she tricked us," while my mother pulled at the locked gate, her heels sinking into the gravel. Marcy, sitting near the head table, leaned in and whispered, "They really thought they could steal your wedding." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Desmond walked up to the small stage and raised his hand gently. The DJ cut the music. Guests turned. "Friends, family," Desmond began, voice steady. "We don't want to keep secrets, so here's one that's already made its way to the public." He hit play on a small tablet connected to the projector. Audio began rolling, snippets from weeks prior. My mother's voice clipped and cold. "Kayla doesn't need the spotlight, she never has." Valora's voice chimed in. "Let me have this. Just this one thing." Then Dad. "If she resists, we pull the plug. It's our money." A collective exhale filled the space, like truth finally given oxygen. I stepped beside Desmond, held the mic he passed me, and looked out over the sea of faces, some stunned, some nodding, some wiping at their eyes. "I was told I always fade," I said, voice clear. "That I'd give up, that I'd get over it. But today I didn't." Applause broke out, not out of pity but understanding, not for the drama but for the resolve. The silence I had carried for so many years was gone, replaced with something solid, visible, and mine. After the toast, I stepped outside the tent for air. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows over the garden path. I wandered toward the parking area, needing a moment alone before the first dance. That's when I saw her, my mother, sitting by the curb, heels off, holding her phone like it was the last thing tethering her to dignity. Her makeup was smudged, and her once pristine blouse now creased from panic and sweat. She wasn't crying, not anymore. She just sat there, watching cars leave the fake venue in the distance. She didn't look up when I approached, just said, "You made a fool of us." I stood quietly, the air between us tense and heavy. "No," I replied. "You did that all by yourselves. I just stopped covering for it." She finally looked at me, eyes tired, not pleading, but not hardened either. "Do you feel better now?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, but I feel free." That answer didn't bring her comfort, and it wasn't meant to. It was just the truth. She looked away, and I turned back toward the path. As I walked, I heard her say under her breath, "We raised you better." I paused. "No?" I said over my shoulder. "You raised me quiet. I became better on my own." The lanterns lining the path flickered to life, and soft music resumed from the reception tent. I took a deep breath and walked back into the light, where I belonged. After the last guest left and the final petals were swept from the grass, I sat in the quiet of our living room, heels kicked off, dress stored away, and the silence pressing gently on my shoulders. Desmond was already asleep in the next room, breathing softly. The glow from my phone screen was the only light in the space as I scrolled through photos, each one proof that I had taken something back. I thought of my mother, sitting alone on the curb outside the fake venue, her head bowed like she finally understood what being on the outside felt like. But truthfully, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clear. Like the fog had finally lifted and the contours of who I was, who I had always been, had sharpened. 3 days later, I got a text from Aunt Marcy. "Small tea at my place, no drama, promise." I hesitated before replying, but I went. Her home smelled of lavender and old wood. It was the kind of place that always felt like a safe landing, even when the family world around it was burning. When I stepped into her kitchen, she smiled and nodded toward the table. There it sat, a small chocolate raspberry mousse cake, no lemon. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Marcy poured the tea. "I remembered what you actually liked," she said. "Took me long enough." I sat, quietly touched, feeling something loosen in my chest. A kindness with no strings. No backhanded smile, no comparison, just someone noticing. 10 minutes in, my youngest cousin wandered in. She was maybe 9 or 10, her hair wild, her knees scuffed. She plopped onto the chair beside me, reached for a cookie, then looked up suddenly. "I saw your wedding video," she said, mouth full. "You were so brave." That hit deeper than any speech or toast I'd received. It wasn't admiration, it was recognition. She saw me. "They always make me wear dresses I don't like," she added. I leaned closer and held her hand. "Then one day, you'll wear what feels like you, and they'll just have to deal with it." She grinned, crumbs still on her lips, and for the first time in a long while, I saw myself reflected in someone who hadn't learned to shrink yet. Later, as Marcy packed up leftovers, I checked my phone. One new message, from Valora. "You humiliated us. You're no sister to me." I stared at it for a while. The old me might have tried to explain, to apologize, to make peace even when none was offered. But this time, I simply hit archive, not out of spite, but because I had finally made peace with myself. I spent that night doing something I had always avoided, framing a photo, not of us, not of them, but of me. It was a candid moment from the wedding, just me, walking down the aisle, smiling. No father, no bridesmaids, no sister holding my hand, just me. And underneath, I taped a small note I had handwritten. Finally, I walked where I belonged. The next morning, I hung it in my hallway. The hallway that had once been lined with borrowed approval and distant compliments. It felt different now, mine. Before I left Marcy's that afternoon, she offered me a small box to take home. I opened it when I got back. Inside was another slice of that cake, wrapped neatly. No fanfare, no forced celebration. Just a quiet reminder. Back in Chapter 1, the vanilla lemon cake had made me feel invisible, like my preferences didn't matter, like I was a guest in my own life. Now, this small chocolate raspberry slice said something else. "I see you." And that was all I'd ever wanted. Sometimes healing doesn't come from being forgiven or even from forgiving others. It comes from finally seeing your own worth and choosing peace over approval. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, know this: your story matters. And your voice? It's never too late to use it. Have you lived through a family drama that changed everything? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories like this.